there is a painful moment many people never see coming. One day, you look at your mother, your father, or your grandparent and realize they are no longer standing in the role they once held in your life. They are softer, more sensitive, more repetitive, more easily hurt. Sometimes they become stubborn, sometimes they become quiet, sometimes they complain more, worry more, or seem harder to please. And if we are not careful, we misread all of it. We call them difficult, dramatic, controlling, negative, or old-fashioned. But very often, what we are actually witnessing is something much deeper, a human being slowly losing strength, certainty, identity, and time, while still desperately needing dignity, reassurance, and love. To understand elderly parents and grandparents, we first have to understand one painful truth. Aging is not only a physical process, it is also a psychological unraveling of everything that once made a person feel secure in the world. When people are young or in midlife, they usually build identity through usefulness. They work, solve problems, raise children, make decisions, earn respect, carry responsibility. Their sense of self becomes tied to being needed, but as they grow older, many of those roles begin to disappear. Retirement comes, children become independent, friends pass away, the body slows down, memory changes, energy becomes limited. And underneath these changes, a quiet emotional crisis can begin. If I am no longer useful in the way I once was, who am I now? This is why some elderly people become more sensitive, more controlling, or more easily hurt by small things. What looks like stubbornness is often fear wearing armor. What looks like irritation is sometimes grief with no language. What looks like criticism may actually be a trembling attempt to still matter in the family. Many older adults are not just reacting to the present moment, they are reacting to accumulated losses, lost youth, lost status, lost routines, lost friends, lost health, lost certainty. And because many of them were raised in generations that did not encourage emotional openness, they may not say, "I feel lonely," or "I am afraid of becoming a burden." Instead, those feelings come out sideways. They repeat stories, they complain about little things, they ask the same question again and again. They become upset when no one listens carefully. Sometimes they hold too tightly, sometimes they withdraw. At the core of this is a universal human need that does not disappear with age. The need to feel seen, valued, and emotionally safe. You know, a 70-year-old heart still hurts when it feels ignored. An 80-year-old mind still longs to feel important. Sometimes a grandparent may talk too much not because they love hearing themselves, but because silence has become too heavy. And honestly, a parent may criticize not because they enjoy conflict, but because they no longer know how to ask for closeness without reaching for control. One of the greatest psychological mistakes younger people make is assuming that age creates emotional maturity in every area. It does not. People grow older, but their old wounds often grow older with them. Someone who never felt secure may become even more anxious in old age. Someone with an attachment wound may become clingier, more suspicious, or more afraid of abandonment. Someone who built self-worth around sacrifice may feel invisible once they are no longer actively needed. Getting older does not erase the need for love. In fact, it often makes that need more naked. Sometimes the elderly are not becoming harder to love. They are becoming easier to hurt. In everyday life, the psychology of aging rarely appears in dramatic speeches. It shows up in tiny moments that families often misunderstand. Like A father asks whether you have eaten, even though he asked the same thing an hour ago. Or a mother complains that no one visits, even after a long phone call. A grandparent repeats an old story for the 10th time and watches your face, not because the story is new, but because they are checking whether they still exist inside your attention. These moments are not only habits, they are often emotional signals. You know, many elderly people become more repetitive because, honestly, repetition creates a sense of safety. When the world changes faster than they can keep up, familiar stories, familiar routines, and even familiar worries become like psychological handrails. The same thing is true for overthinking, really. An older parent may worry excessively about money, health, the weather, or even whether the door is locked. On the surface, it might look irrational, but underneath, it's often the mind just trying to create some control in a stage of life that's filled with increasing uncertainty. The body is less predictable. The future feels shorter. Dependency becomes more imaginable. Honestly, anxiety grows where control shrinks. This is also why older adults can become more emotionally reactive in family relationships. A small delay in replying to a message may feel to them like rejection. A canceled visit may feel bigger than it looks. When people have fewer social roles and fewer sources of emotional nourishment, family contact carries much more psychological weight. What seems small to you may actually feel enormous to them. If a younger person has 10 places to feel valued, an older person may have only 2. So when one of those places feels unstable, the emotional impact becomes, well, amplified. You can see this dynamic in love, friendship, and self-worth across the whole lifespan. A person with insecure attachment may people-please because they fear abandonment. A traumatized person may self-sabotage because, well, closeness feels dangerous. An elderly parent often carries these same patterns, only now they are mixed with loss, fragility, and time. The mother who becomes controlling may once have survived life by managing everything herself. The father who never expresses affection directly may still crave validation, but only knows how to offer advice, criticism, or practical help. Their behavior can be clumsy, but the need beneath it is deeply human. Sometimes an elderly person is not arguing about the dishes, the medicine, the television volume, or the holiday plan. They are fighting a quieter battle, the terror of becoming irrelevant, dependent, invisible, or alone inside their own family. This is why families get trapped in painful loops. The elderly feel neglected, so they become more critical or demanding. The younger person feels guilty, irritated, or emotionally exhausted, so they pull away. That distance confirms the elder's fear of being forgotten, which makes the behavior stronger, and the cycle repeats. You know, what repeats in old age is rarely just personality. It's often unfinished emotional history asking one more time to be understood. Healing our relationship with elderly parents and grandparents doesn't actually begin when they suddenly become easier. Instead, it begins when we stop asking them to behave like people who are untouched by fear, loss, and time. Real maturity isn't just about learning how to protect our peace. It's also about learning how to recognize pain when it comes out dressed as silence, stubbornness, criticism, or, neediness. This doesn't mean accepting abuse, losing boundaries, or abandoning ourselves. It means seeing clearly, and sometimes clear seeing is really the beginning of compassion. One of the most healing things we can offer an elderly person is emotional validation. Not fixing, not correcting, not rushing them to be positive. Just, helping them feel real. When your mother says no one has time for me anymore, the deepest response is often not explanation, but recognition. That must feel painful. When your father repeats a worry for the 5th time, sometimes what calms him is not more logic, but the feeling that someone is carrying the fear with him for a moment. Validation is powerful because it restores dignity. It tells the aging heart, you are not too much. You are not invisible. You still matter here. We also need to remember that many elderly people were never taught the language of emotional intimacy. They may not know how to say, I miss you, so they ask why you do not visit. They may not know how to say, I feel useless, so they interfere in everything. They may not know how to say, I am scared of dying, so they become obsessed with health, routine, and control. If we listen only to their words, we may honestly miss them completely. But if we learn to hear the feeling underneath the behavior, a different relationship becomes possible. And, something else quietly heals in that process, us. Because learning to care for the elderly often brings us face to face with our own wounds. Our impatience may come from unresolved childhood pain. Our distance may come from years of not feeling emotionally safe with them. Our guilt may come from thinking love must always feel easy. But sometimes love is not soft. Sometimes love is sitting beside someone whose personality has been shaped by pain and choosing not perfection, but presence. Not agreement, but humanity. One day, many of the things that annoy us now will become the very things we miss. The repeated story, the familiar complaint, the slow footsteps in the hallway, the call that came at the wrong time, and grief, well, it has a cruel way of revealing what love was trying to teach us all along. People do not need to be flawless to deserve tenderness. The elderly are not asking us to save them from aging. Often they are only asking for one quieter, holier thing. Please do not let me disappear before I am gone.